Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and I've got a special guest to the channel. I've got Loren Molinare from The Dogs, Little Caesar, and more recently, Slamdinistas. How's it going, mate?
Hey Peter, it's going good, It's my Friday afternoon and your Monday AM, so this is mind blowing. I'm
It is.
talking
I'm,
into
I'm
the
in the future.
future.
So the Slamdinistas are releasing a new album called Wild and Restless on April 25 through Rumbar Records. So I had a look at your band bio, and it describes it as New York glitter trash, Detroit street punk, and British invasion rave ups. Would that kind of describe the sound of this album?
Yeah, yeah, I think so, because the New York street trash kind of thing. When we went to New York last September and did our first East Coast shows, Um, people said they liked our first album, Shoot for the Stars, but you sound like a Lower East Side of Manhattan trashy rock and roll band. So I myself and the band really wanted this record to reflect what people thought we sounded like live, and then the Detroit side of things, I am from the Motor City and I kind of bring that in and then the kind of 60s thing we always loved the British invasion bands and the Kinks writing songs 2 minute 39 seconds. There's something to say about get in and out before you bore people, and we kind of took that approach on a lot of these songs too. We just didn't, because the world we live in is everyone's got so many distractions. You've got like six different ways people can text you, and it's like
Mm.
we want to just like hopefully keep people's attention to the songs and stuff. So, and then there's a bit of that pub rock feel that's carried over from this too. I mean, we always love the Faces and Rock Pile and stuff like that. So,
Fantastic. So there's 13 songs on the album. Was it a quick process to lay down the tracks, or did it take a bit of time to do this?
we did it basically pretty much live in the studio. It was real quick. We did probably seven songs in one day and five or six the next day. And even like the song Latchkey Kids, the extended version, we played almost 8 minutes on that and on purpose didn't want any overdubs or anything on it to see what kind of magic would happen if the so-called tape was just rolling. And yeah, it was done quick because these days with lack of everything's self-financed, you got to be pretty quick. And I've done albums before where you do 30 to 50 takes and it kind of takes away from the essence of rock and roll. I mean, we don't live in a perfect world, and how can you make rock and roll totally perfect? I mean, that's where I think part of the boredom happens with the technology and music these days. It gets to be like elevator music after a while because it's too perfect. And we wanted to make sure we played in beat and not hit wrong chords per se or be off key vocals, but we didn't want to think about it too much because rock and roll's an untamed beast and we just wanted to let it be.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of rock and roll pedigree in the band. When do you know when a band has chemistry? Is it your experience that it's straight away you know there's chemistry, or is it more of a slow burn?
I think some bands that I've been associated with, it's been a while before you realize that, but I think if you've been around and you're kind of a seasoned player, you know that when it's happening, it happens, and it happens pretty quick. And with the Slamdinistas, um, I had a long history with Gabriel Johns, the lead singer and lyricist, and I knew where he was coming from. I had produced some of his solo records in the past, and this record, um, Well, the first record we did for the Slams, I take it back, Shoot for the Stars. Um, that's was going to be a Gabriel John solo record, and the world had shut down for COVID when we started that. And Brian Irving, the drummer, who was had played with me in this band called Glitter Trash, and Glitter Trash had its beginnings back in Detroit with Jenna, the lead singer. I brought Brian into this project with Gabriel. And once Gabriel showed us some of the songs in that last record, I kind of went, wow, it sounds like pub rock. The world does not need another singer-songwriter. I think this is going to be a band. And then Gabriel brought in Mike Gavigan from The Blessings, this great LA band. And then at that point, Paul Ill was our bass player. Uh, and then that record came out. Going into this record, Paul Ill bowed out being in the band because he had other commitments going on. So he brought in his buddy Pete Downing, who's a Boston bass player, and we had common interests with him. And but on this record, all those influences, those shared influences, really came together, on these songs. So.
Fantastic. You've had a very varied, wonderful career. And I want to go back in time to 1968, 69 Detroit and the Dogs. Was this uncharted territory playing that style of music?
Well, with bands like the MC5 and the Stooges and, the Amboy Dukes and that great Detroit rock scene that was happening, and it had been happening for a few years down there in the ballrooms, the Grandy Ballroom and stuff. That was a major influence on me, let alone the Motown scene. But where we put the band together, the Dogs up in Lansing, which is the capital city, it wasn't, there was mostly top 40 bands up there. And, I never had the knack for learning cover songs. So I was forced early on to learn how to write originals out of necessity. And, but, but it was uncommon in the Dogs days to have a female bass player. I mean, we got a lot of flack for that early on in 68, even though this was pre Susie Quattro happening, little on, Chrissy Hine and the Pretenders and stuff. So, um, yeah, it was tough for us for a bit playing that kind of music.
How did the audiences take to you initially?
You know, we had a lot of fans and stuff. Some people were a little taken back by the stance of playing loud and fast, and this was years ahead of the Ramones, right? And kind of like doing, I mean, we did a song from the 60s. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, like Are You a Boy or Are You a Girl by the Barbarians. And it was a song about having your hair too long and I even my father like, was really uptight at me when my hair looked like Pete Townsend, like a mod. It was too long. So we played that song, but in by 1970, we were playing that, and the feminist movement was starting to happen then, the very early days of it. And we got in trouble for playing Are You a Boy, Are You a Girl? They called it cock rock, which was like, no, it's a mid 60s rock and roll song. So, I mean, this thing with the Dogs, we early on, we started to cause problems like, you know, doing stuff, not that we tried to, but, I guess that's why people say we were a punk band because we were doing stuff, getting in trouble before it was even punk, you know?
Yeah, because I could imagine America was very conservative in the late 60s. And for a band like you to come out, along with Iggy and MC5, would have just been a mind explosion for a lot of folk, wouldn't it?
Yeah, both those bands really had impact on just me as a fan of Detroit rock, let alone of
Mm,
what I after our first gig, the Dogs' first gig was opening for the MC5 in '69, and I witnessed what a rock and roll band could do to an audience. And I'd never seen anything like that, that powerful. And I've never seen anything to this day, mind you, that powerful. And I've seen a lot of great bands and we've played with a lot of great bands, but there was nothing like those guys when they were in their prime.
Right. What was it like opening for these bands? Was it quite daunting, intimidating?
Um, yes, I mean, because we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we were just thrown in there as juveniles, basically. And but it was real inspiring. I mean, we got to open for Brownsville Station, the Rationals, the Amboy Dukes, Ted Nugent, and Chuck Berry, and it was a real education of like the bar's been raised and it's like if you're going to compete against those bands, you better have your act together, you know? So it was a great education.
Yeah. Chuck Berry. Any stories? Did you encounter him? I hear he's an interesting character.
Yeah, I mean, when we had moved to New York in like 73, 74, we did a show with him and John Lennon's band, Elephant's Memory was the backup band for Chuck. And we did the back line and we had four Marshall stacks and the promoter tried to save money and get Chuck to play through a Marshall stack. Well, that's not like his Fender dual showman and he didn't like that. Um, and Chuck, it was two shows, and Chuck, the first show, barely even tuned up. He wasn't into it, and it was like first time I'm seeing like this legendary guy, and I'm just going. I was so disappointed, and the promoter had paid him, and he stuck all the money in his front pocket, and it seemed to me it was just like all about the money, and I mean, I understand hearing the stories how the music business ripped him off, and probably by then he was just so jaded. But the promoter came into our dressing room and said, Chuck's pissed off. And this was before the second show. And he says, I got to do something. So he said, I got to get him a hooker. And so a hooker prostitute came there whatever happened. And let me tell you, Chuck came out for that second show and he was doing the duck walk. He was in tune and he was freaking into it. And I just went and it was kind of disappointing to me because I thought it was all about the music. And so once again, it was a crash course in learning like, there's other factors at play here in the music business.
Sometimes you shouldn't meet your heroes. I think Keith Richards said he was one of the most disappointing experiences of his life, meeting or working with Chuck. So,
Well,
you know,
yeah, you can tell that in that film where Keith is the music director and Chuck and him almost come to blows in that film and stuff. But yeah, yeah, it's yeah, I watch who I even talk to, people that I respect anymore, because there's been some bad situations of coming up to somebody I respect, say, "Hey, I think you're great, thank you,"
yeah,
and
yeah,
get blown off. So.
yeah. So with the MC5 and Iggy Pop, and I understand, I can see that you were in awe. Did you ever think that they would have the impact on music that they actually did, even to this day?
No, and obviously they didn't either. I mean, it was such short-lived careers, even though the MC5 was together in the early 60s and that first album came out in 68 and by 72 it was over with. And Iggy, after he started working with Bowie and Raw Power comes out in 73, it was maybe 75 and they were done with. But it's just like the Ramones. The Ramones came out and they were kind of panned by the critics and people didn't get it. People in the know and in the scene got the Ramones, but now 45 years after the Ramones, they're like the Beatles in South America. And MC5 and Stooges, it's been lasting and they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And yeah, I don't think anybody knew the impact that the Detroit bands, let alone the Ramones, was going to have on, you know, the music industry.
Absolutely. Um, share the story about you supporting Bob Seger at the Toledo Sports Arena in late '71. I hear that the show was quite controversial, and the band got banned in Michigan. Can you explain what happened? The
Peter,
dogs.
you really want me to go there? Okay. It actually, I think it was in like early 74. We had moved back from New York, and there was a show at the Toledo Sports Arena, which is a hockey arena, and it was Bob Seger headlining, the Dogs, and then a couple opening bands. And we were set up on stage in front of 9,000 kids, all our gear set up. The promoter and I think of Bob Seger's road manager came in and said, Bob's tired and he wants to get back to Ann Arbor. So he's going on right now, and you guys are going to close the show. The band and our manager um, said, well, we're already set up. We're No one will stay for us after Bob, the headliner, plays. We're going to go up and play one song. And they said, if you go on stage, even though you're set up, you're going to go to jail. And we go, yeah, we'll rock and effing roll. And we got up on stage. They pulled the plug on us. Toledo City Police came on stage with billy clubs and we started beating the band up and the roadies in front of the audience. I was the only person in the band not arrested. 2 days later, on Monday morning, the judge threw out the federal felony charges of inciting to riot and let the band go. In the meantime, the booking agency that booked Bob Seger, MC5, Stooges, all that stuff, uh, said if the Dogs are on a bill to all promoters, well, you can't have our headline bands. And so basically, we were banned, and that's why we moved to New York because of standing up for rock and roll. Would we do it over again, Peter? Hmm, let me think. Yes.
I love it. Love it. So you moved to New York City around circa 1973, and you meet a very young Paul Stanley, and you actually asked to open for Kiss, which you did at the Coventry. What was that like, opening for Kiss?
Well, yes, we met them on our first day in Manhattan, and I was kind of how shall I say, ignorant to the music scene in New York and fresh from driving in from Detroit, asked if we could play their big gig at the Diplomat Hotel the night that they got signed to their manager. Paul Stanley just said, look, this is New York. You just can't come here from Detroit and think you can play a Kiss show. But if you get a gig, we'll come see you. And if you're cool, maybe you can play with Kiss. Well, they did come and see us. We had a like a Tuesday night at the Coventry in Long Island City. They said, okay, you can play with Kiss on a weekend if you go pick up our gear in Amityville. So then we picked up Kiss in our big rental truck and went to Amityville and picked up their gear, took it back to Manhattan, and they let us play with them on a Saturday night at the Coventry. And I still didn't know that they wore makeup until right before the gig. But we shared the dressing room with them, and um, they did everything they said they were going to do. They let us play, and it was interesting because next thing you know, they were signed and started exploding, right? And fast forward to 1990 when Little Caesar got signed, and we went on the Kiss tour. The first day of the tour, uh, we got to meet the guys, and Ron, my lead singer in Little Caesar, said to the Kiss guys, Paul and Gene, you guys remember Loren from the Detroit Dogs? And they go, oh, yeah, the Dogs. So it was really funny to see them like 25 years later when I was in Caesar and stuff. And, that tour was great. Gene would watch us every night and take notes and come back and tell us what we were doing wrong every night. And
That's very
hey,
Gene-like, isn't it? That's so
yes,
Gene.
yes, but nobody tells you what not to do in this business. So I got to give him credit and due respect that
Yes.
he took this time out. And we did, I mean, we never played arenas before. Caesar played little Hollywood clubs, and, playing a 200-seat club is not playing like a 30,000 seat arena. So, yeah, uh, fun times there with the Kiss Boys going from the 70s to the 90s.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. So, what were your personal observations of the band? Because they're all larger than life characters, the four of them, in 1973. Any personal observations? Did you start to see the persona of the Gene and the Paul, or were they very sort of humble and
Well, off stage, it was nothing like what they were on stage with the, super comic book hero,
mm,
uh, characters that they were.
mm,
Myself, I was just fascinated that they were so well defined. They knew what the mission was and the goal, and they went out and did it. And yeah, and it's just amazing. I hear stories that they would always videotape every performance, like a football team or a soccer team, even though they won the game, maybe they still said, "Well, we dropped the ball there," and they were always trying to get better and better. So, it's an institution in rock and roll.
yeah. Did you have any inkling that they would be as big as they were based on their craft, their music craft, the songs, their performances?
No, No, I had no idea. They didn't strike me as powerful as the MC5 did,
Yep.
a few years before, but I knew they had something going on, and you know, uh, they had the image thing down, and they knew who they were and where they wanted to go. And like, it was funny because I barely could grow facial hair. And by the time I got to New York, I had a beard. And that first night that we played with him at the Coventry, Gene came up to me and he goes, "The Grateful Dead are dead. Shave that beard. This is glitter glam rock." And I went, wow, these people in New York are kind of harsh. But I did take his advice not long after that. And I've been clean shaven ever since. So,
Did you find it tough adjusting to life in New York from Detroit? Because was it a bit tough for a couple of years living there?
It was very tough. I mean, we lived on 50-pound bag of potatoes. We crashed in empty, vacant restaurants. Um, but culturally and musically, it was so different than Detroit for us, and it opened our eyes to the world so much more. And hanging out at Max's Kansas City, and the whole New York Dolls art crowd and Andy Warhol scene. I mean, yeah, it was a crash course on stuff that we didn't even dream what was happening.
Did you find it ultra competitive with bands such as Television and New York Dolls and the like in that era?
Yeah, I never sensed a competition thing. What I did sense was from the dictators from the Bronx to Kiss, from Queens to Television to Talking Heads to Debbie Harry, Christine, and Blondie. They were all so different musically, but they had the same mindset. And it wasn't punk rock. It barely was being called new wave at that point, I think. But I thought it was really cool. And in those early New York days, it was like all the bands went to each other's shows, and it was a very tight scene. They supported each other. So I thought that was great. And I had never seen anything like that. And it was a real honor just to be able to kind of play shows with a lot of those bands.
Yeah. So in '75. you decide to go to somewhere a little bit warmer and you relocated to LA. Did the change recharge the band? Because it was a completely different scene, wasn't it? With the whiskey and the Starwood and venues like that.
Yeah, well, we had before that we went down to Florida and went through the deep south to Florida, and this was in '75, and disco was happening then, and we were getting fired in several cities for playing too loud and too fast, and happened in Orlando, and our drummer Ron Wood quit. So Mary, myself, and our manager and our road crew decided we're going to Hollywood. We're not going back to Detroit, and we got to LA and kind of was living in the streets for a while, and then got it together and met other like-minded bands that were moving, had moved to Hollywood, like uh, early version of the Motels. Martha Davis and Dean Chamberlain came down from Berkeley. This band, The Pop, had came to LA, and we kind of joined forces together because at that point, the Whiskey and the Starwood were not booking local bands. And so we started sort of this street gang of bands called Radio Free Hollywood, put on our own show, um, and started, the scene started building from that. And then we all started getting booked at the Starwood and Whiskey and around Los Angeles and stuff.
Yeah, in 1976, you befriended Van Halen and played shows with them. Can you describe the first time you heard Van Halen? What were your initial thoughts?
Well, yeah, that was our first proper show at in Hollywood at the Starwood, and it was Van Halen, Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads, and the Dogs opening, and we got to share the dressing room with Van Halen, and I knew of them because our manager at that point had told us about them, had worked with them and stuff, and you know, I knew that they were a hardworking band playing 5, 6 nights a week, playing 4 or 5 sets a night, cover songs with originals. Um, they they were a well-oiled machine, you know. I was kind of blown away by them. David Lee Roth, I thought was pretty impressive frontman, and they just had this thing. And of course, Eddie, what can you say about Eddie? It was like seeing a new Jimi Hendrix from another solar system, and that was the start of us playing with them. Probably, I don't know, 6, 8 times between uh, the Starwood and the Whiskey, and it wasn't. I think it was. I think it was probably January past that show we played with them that they finally did get signed, and yeah, it was pretty amazing. I at that point, me as a guitar player, after seeing Eddie, I just went, wow, his dexterity. I don't have that. My influences were Jeff Beck, Wayne Kramer from MC5, Chuck Berry.
Different style.
Different style. I
Yeah,
respect. Eddie could write a really great song. But Tom Petty's first album had came out then. I thought I would go down that route and learn how to write a good rock and roll pop tune, you know. I
yeah.
thought that would be the route I would go.
Those early shows, the rumor has it that Eddie would turn his back to the audience so he wouldn't share or show his tapping technique. Is that true?
Maybe a little bit, but I remember seeing him front on doing that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you just couldn't deny him. His tone was amazing, and he played effortlessly, and those guys just looked like they were having such a good time. I mean, they loved to play. I mean, and it showed, you know.
Yeah. Any personal observations about the dynamics within the band? Was David Lee Roth in that era the on character that we all know, the larger in life, or was he a little bit more reserved?
24/7 is Diamond Dave, man. You know, he was there, and kudos to David Lee Roth. He did help us a bit and was always friendly. And he was responsible for introducing us to their manager, who got us to end up opening for ACDC's American debut at the Whiskey and everything. So yeah, I have just much respect and gratitude to Dave and the rest of those guys. They were always cool to us and everything. So yeah, it was amazing. Another band that we just watched go, you know,
Yeah,
hit the stratosphere. So
absolutely. I understand you got to know Ted Templeton, and he was not a fan of David Lee Roth. Is that true?
you know what? I wasn't I never really knew him. Um I actually went to a book written about Van Halen, and Ted was there at the book signing for this other author, and um, he all I know is he really thought Eddie was great. You know, there was debatable questions about other people in the band, but hey, history proves that no matter what the producer thinks or the A&R guy, Van Halen still happened, and I'm glad they let the band be the way their fans knew them to be, because there was nothing wrong with it. You know, that's the problem with record cats and producers. They always
Yeah.
think they know better and can, well, we'll take the singer away and put a new band behind them or do this
Mm.
or and then their magic's gone, I mean,
So you also saw Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads. What's your observations about Randy and Quiet Riot? Did you think that they would amount to something?
if I can be perfectly honest, we were in the dressing room after we played, so I didn't really see them that night. I did see Quiet Riot after that, but I think Randy had already left.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think he is is a great guitar player. Early on, I knew about him, but I don't have a whole lot to say about Quiet Riot.
Yeah,
It
I
was
understand.
Van Halen was the headliner, and they're the ones that captivated my imagination that night, my
Yeah.
memory.
So you supported ACDC at the Whiskey for a three gig run in August '77. What was your observations of that band?
Interesting. Punk was really starting to be a thing in America. And, everyone was expecting, oh, this punk band from Australia. Well, AC/DC is not a punk band, right? They came there and blew the walls down being AC/DC, as we know. And I was like, I'd never seen anybody like Angus Young. And, of course, Bon Scott was just the coolest. Um, and it was a great gig for the Dogs because we could open for AC/DC or Van Halen or the Ramones and still pull it off because we kind of would ride between punk rock, hard rock, and metal and stuff like that. Um, the management of the Whiskey forced us to turn down because they said we were louder than AC/DC, believe it or not. So that's a badge of honor I will take to the grave. Um, and and Bon Scott came into our dressing room with a bottle of Jack and said, "Hey mates, how's it going?" And he was just a cool guy, and I took a sip of Jack with Bon Scott. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Um, yeah, so it was just great to be on that show, and it was just amazing. Like you asked me about Kiss. Oh, did you expect them to do anything? I didn't know, but AC/DC, I just went, this band's gonna just rocket the universe here, man. They're gonna do it, and they did it.
Yeah, probably is it because that they had the stagecraft already set? Because you had Angus doing his crazy guitar stuff and Bon had that sort of persona. Do you think like they were just already instantly ready built for the American audiences?
Yeah, I mean, they had that stage show down, but they had the songs and
Yes.
they had the power. And I mean, you listen to that album, and I mean, they were like in 1975, they had their shit together, you know? And it doesn't hurt having Vanda and Young around the band from the Easy Beats, you know, and working with the band, and it's in their blood, I think. But yeah, just just amazing. And still, you know, they still are doing it, even though Malcolm and, you know, a few of the guys have passed away. It's just like
Yeah,
the rock keeps rolling.
absolutely. So in 1978, you moved the band, the Dogs, to England. Was this a last roll of the dice for the band to get a contract to get that extra layer of success?
Last roll of the dice. I like you. Yeah, you know what? It was just like how moving to New York was the last roll of the dice for us in Detroit because we got blackballed. It got to the point in LA where we couldn't get arrested. And I had met this English fellow who booked bands in LA, and he kept saying, "You need to do like a Jimi Hendrix and move to London. You will happen in England." So um, we sold everything we had and moved to England, sort of a la a Jimi Hendrix thing. We had backing from London. Unfortunately, once we got to London, the backer fell out of the situation, and then it got a little rough. But we stayed in England for 3 months, and it was very interesting to be in England where all our heroes had came from. And mind you, this was like we left in I believe October of 78. So it was that punk was still happening, but it was the tail end of the British punk scene going into the Saxon, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden kind of.
New wave of British heavy metal, but you also had a lot of post punk that was in between.
Yeah. So like our first gig in York, there was punkers pogoing up and down, and then you had young metalhead boys with denim jackets with buttons on it, head banging. And I mean, we thought we had died and went to heaven because it is the best of both worlds. And you know, we did some really great shows there. Went, you know, to Belfast and Dublin, and it was very interesting to go to North Ireland in those days because we didn't really understand what the conflict was with the British Army and the IRA and all that stuff. And um, kids would come up to us and say, "What religion are you?" And we knew better, and we said, "Rock and roll."
Yeah,
You know,
that's a good answer.
rock and roll. So, but it got to the point where we ended up having to squat in North London in the middle of January of the winter time, and it just got too much for us, and we ended up crawling, limping back to Detroit, Lansing, and trying to regroup after that one.
Yeah. Did was there any recognition in the UK? Did the press talk you up? Were they aware of you?
You know, with the different publications there, Melody Maker hated us. They said we were like, I don't know if you ever heard of the Waltons TV show.
Yes.
Uh, they said the dogs were like the Waltons meets Black Sabbath and Pandas. And then Sounds magazine, which is really great. Jeff Barton, I think his name was, loved the band, and we got really great reviews on our Slash Your Face EP that we had released there. So, you know, but we just didn't have the resources to stay there, and but that's the only time the dogs went to Europe. But we have since then, over the decades, we've got so many fans. that we would love to go back there at some point while we still have time. You know?
Were you ever close to a record deal while you were in the UK? Were you like ever at a gig and there might have been rumours there was some industry folk there looking at you?
You know, there was two times in our career before we went to England, that we almost got signed to Jet Records, which was Don Arden's label that ELO was on, and
Yep.
Arden or Sharon Osbourne's dad.
Mm,
But they passed on us. And then in the late 80s, uh, John Carter, who was at Capitol and signed the Motels, and Tina Turner wanted to sign us to Atlantic, but they passed on us too. So, you know, we basically that was the only two shots, and so we've kind of just went uh stayed on the underground because at this point major record labels don't mean anything, you know, to bands
yeah.
like us. So, you know, and we're fine with it. You know, we actually are on a great label, the same label the Slamdinistas are on. We're on Rumbar Records, who just put out this 50-year kind of anthology thing that we did on Rumbar. And
Yeah.
so
Well, I guess it's more for them. And I think that's a nice little segue to your experiences in a band where you get signed to a label. So you've seen it at both sides of the coin, haven't you?
yes.
Indeed. So let's talk about Little Caesar. You joined the band in 1988, and this was a band signed to a major label, Geffen. And the first album, this one, was recorded in 1990 and produced by Bob Rock. So, what was it like working with Bob Rock?
Yeah, it was quite an experience to get taken out of Hollywood and go up to Vancouver, because at that point Vancouver was like the new Liverpool, with Bruce Fairbairn and Bob working on Aerosmith albums, and the Cult and Motley Crue and Metallica. Um and it was great. I mean, you know, Bob said he saw us as Bad Company meets kind of like, you know, humble pie, and we thought our record was going to be like that. And you know, he didn't really mess too much with the songs, and you know, he's quite meticulous in the studio, and you know, he's got an impeccable ear for tuning and being on pitch and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think in hindsight now, Geffen A&R, like John Kolodner, who was like the guru over there, wanted to try to change the band to mold us to be the next Bon Jovi, and that was the wrong band to try to make like Bon Jovi. And because it was just, you know, a really kind of soulful singer, Ron Young, very soulful. The band somewhere between AC/DC, ZZ Top, and the Rolling Stones is what our thing was. And we weren't pretty boys like the LA glam scene that was going on. And yeah, we were poised to, you know, really do well. I mean, Jimmy Iovine was the manager of the band. As you said, we were on the Kiss tour. Um, but all things started changing, you know. We only sold like 260, 70,000 in 6 weeks, and that didn't please the record company. And I think they started losing interest a bit. We lost our management, and you know, Jimmy Iovine's quite the industry heavyweight. And really Nirvana like was had came out in between our first and second album, and that kind of solidified the end of our career at Geffen, because they just didn't really want to support the band anymore. Even though our second album came out, we went to England um, on Influence, that record, and 5 stars review and Kerrang and stuff like that. But Geffen brought us back after a really successful short UK and European tour. And then it wasn't much after that the band broke up for a few, you know, like, I don't know, that was like 94. It wasn't until like 2004 that we all looked at each other and said, why aren't we doing this again? So
Yeah.
and we started putting him back together. The original guitarist did come back. He ended up leaving after we did our album, our first album out, I think in 2007 or whatever. And we've had several albums out since then on our own label. We've been to Europe like 10 or 12 times. We just got back 6 months ago from the Taiketo Little Caesar tour in the UK, and that was really a blast. And so we're hoping that something like that happens again.
So, by the sounds of it, it sounds like Geffen were really looking for the instant hit. We wanted sales straight away, which is a little bit different to some of their previous acts. Like Guns N' Roses' album took a long time to get an audience, and then it sold like hotcakes. Do you think was there a change of management, or what was the change of direction that they didn't really sort of invest some time with you to let it happen instead of pulling the plug like a month or two down the track?
Well, it was management of the band. Like I said, Jimmy Iovine, our manager, was like having Tony Soprano, a heavyweight. And when he left to start Interscope Records, all things changed. And I think we didn't have really strong management uh, to keep the label focused to stay with us. I mean,
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, Geffen did stick behind Guns N' Roses for a long time. Alan was their manager,
Alan Niven. Yep.
Alan Niven, yeah, and he was there by their side the whole way. So I think that was a huge part of it for Caesar and
Yeah.
Geffen kind of dropping the ball. But
Absolutely. And I have read that you were a little bit disappointed with the sound of the album. You thought it was a little bit glossy and didn't have the rough edges that you were sort of expecting out of the recording process. Is that true?
well, I think our fans thought that, and we did too. I mean, because we we had been told that it was going to be like a humble pie, bad company type record, so and that's what we were hoping for. And we played those tracks. I heard rough mixes, but you know, it's after all this time, the songs still shine through regardless of the glossy production. Um, I think even with a glossy production, if we would have had Geffen's commitment and to keep us on the road, I mean, like, for example, the Black Crowes were on Rick Rubin's label, American Recording, through Geffen. Well, that type of music survived Nirvana and the Seattle scene. We
Exactly.
would we would have too, but we just didn't have the support. And I mean, some things are meant to be and some things aren't. Um, I think we have the last laugh over these last 3 or 4 decades because the band's still together and doing new records and doing what we love to do. So,
Yeah, Chain of Fools was the single, the hit of the album, and it did chart. Whose idea was to bring that to the table for the album?
you know, our original guitarist Apache had suggested that we do that song, and he came up with the bastardized version arrangement. So whereas like AC/DC meets Aretha Franklin, sort of, and luckily for us, Ron Young's vocal pipes and his roots were into R&B and soul music, and but it was just a song in our club set, and we we didn't really want it to be our first single. We felt there was other great songs on the record, but Geffen, their logic was, well, Van Halen did You Really Got Me by the Kinks, so do a cover song. So
Yeah.
but needless to say, it's still a great version, and we still play that version,
To,
and people
to
love it.
to this day, In Your Arms as the follow up. Were you happy that being the logical follow up to Chain of Fools?
Well, there was a bridge track which came out um, before that, and that's always a kiss of death. But In Your Arms, I think, was picked because they wanted to capture the Bon Jovi crowd. I mean, it's a great song, and we still play it today. And we wished Down and Dirty or Drive It Home or Hard Times could have been our second song before the ballad came out. I think we wished another rocker would have been there, but you know, the powers that be picked it, and it's a great song. But what can you do?
Yeah. So the band supported ACDC, Jane's Addiction, Iggy Pop. Um, what approach did the band take to win over those very diverse audiences? Did you change the set list, vary it up?
Um, Not really. It was a stretch to go open for Blue Oyster Cult or Marshall Tucker to Jane's Addiction, or Iggy, um, to Kiss or whatever. No, we just always did what we did. And the Jane's Addiction thing was very interesting to her. We knew those guys and respected them. But yeah, yeah, that's what you do when you're an opening band. You better be able to play for any type of audience within reason. Like I said with the Dogs, we could play with Ted Nugent when his solo album came out, MC5, AC/DC, Van Halen, Ramones. That's quite a spread.
Absolutely. Do you think audiences were getting more difficult to win over as time went on, like into the 90s?
I will say, going back to the 70s, opening for Van Halen, those times we did was not easy. Their fans were diehard,
Yep.
and you better throw it down uh, hard and heavy and loud because they did not have patience for any band other than the Big V.
Mm.
So it was great for us. We had to really work for it, and that's good for a band that you have to work for it, I think, to win an audience over.
And it sort of develops resilience just to
Yeah.
keep going. Um, so with Little Caesar, the follow-up album, Influence, in 1992 comes out, and that's when alternative rock was taking a hold. Do you think that album would have done better if it came out, say, a little bit earlier than 1992? Do you think it was just the wrong time?
Well, yeah, I mean the Seattle scene was really starting to take off then. But you know, regardless of Seattle, the band went to England and was going over like gangbusters, sold out the Marquee in London, sold out in Hamburg, played to 50,000 people at the Bulldog Bash in England. Um, it's just they didn't give us a chance to further it. They just, as you said, if it didn't go like platinum out of the gate, um, they pulled it back. And by that time, it just uh, was really taking its toll internally on us as
Yeah.
people and musicians and stuff. So
So this is about the time when the bean counters were ruling rock, weren't they? Taking over.
yeah, 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 yeah. So
This album's kind of a rougher direction, influence. It's a little bit. It's less polish. It's got a harder, rougher sound. Was that a conscious decision? The band, let's make this a bit more organic, more live sounding.
yeah, yeah, and I think the songs we had written at that point were a bit more to the point. Uh, we had learned a lot from that first Geffen album, and you know, in hindsight, when we go to Europe, I mean, people say that's their favorite album, even more than the first album. And yeah, I mean, Earl Slick had joined the band at that
Yes.
point, and the band had reached another dynamic and level with Slick in the band and the songs that we were writing and stuff. So, I mean, a song like "Stand Up" with I think was the first single that we did a video with, and I mean that song is still very evident to what is going on today. You got to stand up for what you believe in, no
Mm.
matter what they throw your way. And yeah, so,
Yeah.
but I mean, I, we're all used to it. It seems like every band I'm in gets, thrown some hard luck stories, and I think it just builds character if you uh, aren't given a platinum career, like, and it's easy for you. It's like I'm sure for the black bluesmen, it was never easy, and jazz cats in the 30s and 40s. I mean, you just do it because you have to do it. And are you going to win or are you going to lose? I mean, you hope that you win and it's a success, but I mean, throughout time, I think true artists just do it because they have to. Like, I mean, look at painters and poets and people that cut their ears off because they're going mad, before their art. And it's like, I personally have just given up on success, even though I've had glimmers of it with the different bands I've played with, and I really value all this stuff. And like with the Slamdinistas, have a new record with my mates in that band, and you know we all wish for success, but what is success? And it's just the eye of the beholder. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, we're just happy that we have a new record out and
Mm,
band gets along, and we're starting to get some really nice reviews from that. But you just got to be happy to do what you love to do, and if you get a chance to do it, you just do it. Win or lose, win or lose. I mean, I never got into this to make it. I mean, I never even realized you could pick up girls being in a band. I mean, I just was swept away by the music and the escapism of it. And I'm just lucky that I've met a lot of like-minded fellow musicians along the way. I mean, Mary Kay and the Dogs, I've known her for almost 60 years. We still play. The guys in Little Caesar, the guys in Slamdinistas, um, knowing guys like Lou at Rumbar Records that push us bands at the indie level, just appreciate it all. The DJs at Little Steven's Underground Garage, people on the Indie uh, Alliance network out there for radio stations, and the venues. Like in LA, we've got the Redwood Bar and Grill, which is like our CBGBs of Los Angeles, and just appreciate all all the venues that still want to have bands. It's kind of shaky with the economy out there, but
mm.
the rock keeps rolling, live and recording. So I'm just thankful to still be alive to take a part of it myself.
Yeah. Well, you seem to be a guy that's got rock and roll in your veins, and you play in these bands to this very day. So you're still playing with Little Caesar, you're still playing with the Dogs, you're in Tony Marsico in the Ugly Things.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of projects. You must have. There must be a chemistry with all these bands. Is it like a friendship with these guys to this very day that just keeps it going?
Well, with all those bands, they're long histories in the Los Angeles music scene. I've known Tony Marsico when he had the Plugs pre-Crusados, and then some of like Ron Young from Little Caesar and Mark Tremalia. Tony started the new Crusados, and we did that record. And then Tony wanted to do more of a 60s flavored surf rock with the Ugly Things. And so I do the Ugly Things, but I've known Tony for 45 years. The Caesar guys are going on 45 years. Gabriel Johns for 35 years. So all these bands that I'm in, I've known everybody for decades.
Yeah,
So we all know where we're coming from. And I didn't try to be in all these bands. It just sort of happened, you know. But for me, since I've retired from the work world, what else am I going to do except do what I love and do with people that I love personally. and
You
friends
seem
with.
to relish it. You seem to really just, yeah, you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't love it.
Yeah, because if fame or success and money, like, I don't know. I mean, you can have all the fame and success and money, but what are you going to take to your grave other than your legacy and your reputation, And thank God for me, I've been around, lived long enough to be in these really cool bands that um they all do have a legacy and the people in them do in their own right. So uh
Mm.
just thankful to be chatting with you, Peter,
Yeah,
on your great podcast.
and likewise. Are you seeing a lot of cross-generational audiences coming to your shows? Is the rock audience healthy in America?
Yeah, it's funny, like with the dogs, for as old as we are, we draw a very young audience. I mean, we go to Japan and it was very young audiences. We played two shows in Michigan in the fall time. In our hometown, it was an older crowd that grew up with us. But when we played Detroit, it was a really, really lot younger audience. And it's funny with Little Caesar too. On a last English tour, there was a lot of younger fans there that knew about us. Um, yeah, it's funny. I guess guys like myself have got to the age group where a lot of young people do their homework on the history of rock and roll and value seasoned cats like ourselves that have been on the underground for decades, I think.
Absolutely. So tell us, what does the future hold for you for the rest of the year? What are your plans?
Well, Slamdinistas record comes out April 25th. We're doing a May 3rd record release show at the world famous Redwood Bar and Grill I mentioned. Um, I've got, and then we got some other shows coming up too. The band's looking to go back to the East Coast, and there'll be another video coming out and single off this record, I'm sure, in the next couple months. And then, Slamdinistas is really trying to figure out how we can get to Europe and hopefully down under.
I'd
And
love that. We would love that because
yeah,
we
yeah.
have a. I've been going to gigs for quite some time, and there's a lot of bands that were influenced by the Detroit rock scene, like bands like Radio Birdman, if you've heard of them.
Oh, oh, of
Um,
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Saints, etc., etc. And we would love to see the Dogs and Little Caesar, any of those bands. You'd have
Yeah.
an audience down here, definitely.
Yeah. Speaking of the Detroit thing, the Dogs just got signed to I-94 Records, and our single comes out on I-94 in April. So, and
Fantastic.
yeah, I'm sure it'll make it down to some of the British press. I-94 magazine, I think, is down in Australia. So, but yeah, with any of the fun bands that I play in, we'd love to come to Australia. So, and
Yeah.
there's a great supporter of indie rock down in Australia. Mick, um, let me bring him up here. He's got a great radio show. Mick Griffin has his radio show Rock Bottom that's on FM radio in Australia. And Mick plays all the bands that I'm in. He'll like play, Radio Birdman, he'll play New York Dolls, he'll play LA bands. Um, he'll, and what about Amel and the Sniffers?
How good are they?
How amazing.
Raising the flag of rock. Love it.
Yeah, they are great. I had a great experience to work with them. My last professional job, I was artist relations for Black Star Amps, and during COVID, I got to do an interview with Deck, the guitar player, and James Williamson from the Stooges on a Zoom interview. But I And I saw one of the Amy's performances here in LA, and I knew it. I just knew they were going to explode. I mean,
Star quality.
it's
She's
like
she's she's got it. It's the it
it's
factor,
like
isn't it?
it's like ACDC. It's like Radio Birdman. Yeah, and it's just I am so thankful that they're just climbing out there.
Will they make it in America? Will they get into the
They're ma-
mainstream, or will they be underground? I can see
they,
them being they're pretty big in the UK and Europe, but with America, do you think they'll get into the mainstream and make it?
they're they're selling out every show. They've played Coachella, and I think they might be playing Coachella Festival again. There's no stopping them. I mean, and thank God it's getting back to guitars
Yes.
and rock and roll. You
Yeah.
know, I think, and I like Amy, her attitude. She's not afraid to say political stuff. She's quite controversial, and that's what's missing in rock and roll these days. And she's a female, and she's kicking ass on male singers and bands. I mean, you can't put a sex on her. She's just Amy, the
Yeah,
lead singer.
she describes herself as a cross between Dolly Parton and Angry Anderson of Rose Tattoo. I thought that's a nice little
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
description.
Kudos, much respect for them. I mean, it's
Mm,
a refreshing breath of rock and roll here, and they're
ab-
connecting.
absolutely. But Loren, it's been fantastic talking to you. I'd love to talk to you again because you've got so many tales because you've lived the life, and I just think it's so wonderful that you're just waving the flag of rock and still doing it. It's great, and we would love to see you in Australia.
Well, thank
So
you. Hopefully, Peter, we'll get to see you in person one of these days. But thank you for this opportunity.
absolutely, anytime. So I will put all the links to the what you're doing, the Slamdinistas, and the dogs, and folks, Rock Daydream Nation, check it out. Please subscribe, and once again, Loren, wonderful to talk to you. Cheers.
Take care.
Okay,
Play it loud.
absolutely.